Alrighty. Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm going to take a minute here and talk about a topic that I think is really, really cool. It's a topic that I've actually thought about a bunch in the past. I did a video a long time ago on this topic, blending technique, here on YouTube. But today I want to take a minute and say first, before I get into anything, thanks for kind of putting up with all of my promotion. A lot of videos just centered around here's what's coming next. And today I definitely want to mention that I have a class Sunday on blending technique. But instead of just talking about it loosely, I'm going to give away some real content today that you can dig into. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by just talking about a process, something that you can, a way in which you can begin to evolve your playing to get the most emotion out of your playing, to get the fullest sound possible, and to think about how you're actually using technique today versus how you want to be using it and what you want it to do for you. We're going to address a lot of this on Sunday. I'm going to go deep. So if you like this topic, I'll update the video description later with that class link. But let's talk about a process that you can get into. Step one is taking stock of what you actually can do. So let me talk about technique. It falls into so many different parts of the harp. Bending would be a great place to start, just to explore and analyze your bending. So write down all these things, let's say. Write down bending. Here, let me get my little notepad thing up. Write down warbles, like a head shake. So trills could fall under there as well. Hand technique of any kind, like a wah-wah. Tongue blocking, which would include things like octaves and splits and slaps and flutters. Vibrato and tremolo. Dirty notes, staccato versus legato, long notes versus short notes. Dirty notes are just two notes side by side played at the same time. So you make a list of all these distinct diatonic-oriented techniques. And what I would do is I would rate them on a scale from 1 to 10, let's say, just to keep it simple, and organize them by the weakest first. So after you've gone through and figured out where you're at with these things, put them in order. So when you look at them in a practice session, you're thinking about your weakest things first. What is it that I have the most trouble with? Vibrato's a 3, I'll start with that one, or whatever it is for you. And one technique you can do is the following. So everybody try, let me demo something for you. I've got an A harmonica. If we keep things very clean and don't introduce any texture into our playing, what does that sound like? It sounds pretty flat. I'm going to draw in, I'm going to blow, and I can bend, but no other techniques. I'm going to try to keep my hand off the harmonica. No vibrato, no warbles, nothing. What does that sound like? You get a pretty flat, sound, pretty even. And what you can do is take your weakest technique first, everybody, and introduce the weakest technique first. So you're layering in one technique at a time. So I would recommend practicing, if it's vibrato. Okay, my goal is I only get single notes clean, and I can use bending, but I'm not using anything else. I'm going to find a sweet spot where the vibrato can hang out. It might sound like this. Maybe you go bananas and bring in a whole bunch of vibratos, or just choose one. But notice that I moved around and I tried to find a vibrato on the 4, the 3, and then the 2. And then you might say, I'm going to put the vibrato aside after you've had a chance to work on how you're utilizing it and how it's sounding and actually practicing the art of trying to get the vibrato. And then you work on, let's say, hand technique. See where this is going? Then you can merge a couple of these together. See, I'm going to try to bring in both hand technique and vibrato, not necessarily at the same time. I'm not necessarily talking about going a vibrato with a hand, although that's great. I'm just talking about utilizing two techniques and practicing a couple passes at 12 bar blues. That might give you something to chew on just there. And eventually, yes, you want to layer in as much of the technique as you can without it sounding insincere or sort of pre-planned. You want it to come out loose. So each technique for me has like a superpower. You know, it has a thing that it does for you that helps you focus on what you're actually trying to say. So for me, bringing in this, when the technique was finally there, bringing it in within this sort of strong intention helped me focus my solos. It helped me focus, I should say, my solos in a way that I never did before. Because let me give you a really clear example of what I mean. It's tongue slaps. So I'm tongue blocking, thinking about tongue slaps. Bringing that in instantly is going to make your playing more staccato and syncopated. So use that angle, you know? Right? And so you're thinking, well, what is the superpower? Superpower is the word I guess I've landed on for vibrato. Maybe it depends on the context. A warble is like an instant crowd pleaser when it's not overused. It's such a simple approach to playing. But I think you start to assign a more specific emotional value and focal point for the technique itself and how you're using it inside of your improvisation. On Sunday, when I teach this topic, I'm going to show you which ones I most commonly combine together and how they fit into the phrases. How am I what's the creative decision-making process as you remove a single note and substitute that with a specific technique? And that's where I think it gets really interesting. I might even, I think, talk a little bit more about how to use these techniques as an approach to actually present a solo and lean on just one technique to kind of communicate way more than what you're currently doing. So those are the things that I'm going to get into. If you're looking for an approach, though, and you're not going to join me Sunday, even though it's recorded, you could purchase a ticket and watch it later, is I would encourage you guys to make the list, rate your technique, get into practicing it, perhaps like I'm doing with a backing track. Do this by position. Start with second position, then use all the positions you're capable of playing, and just layer in that technique. And eventually, you'll find some sweet spots where you're able to bring in more than you could in the past, where you're able to like interject technique one after the other in a way that you couldn't. It's all about the discovery of how these little pieces fit together. Like, for example, let me leave you with one more really clear example. Like tongue blocking and octaves were your tongue's already on the harmonica, but the positioning of the tongue is different for an octave, if you don't know this, than it is for, say, playing a single note slapped. Your tongue's already on the harp, though. So they tend to want to live together. In a phrase, you can find areas where that'll go back and forth. Or you notice they use tremolo on the 3/6 blow. So again, that's one of the only areas I tend to tremolo on the entire harp. That's something to take note of. Versus, maybe occasionally on the 1/4 blow, but it's about context. And then from there, you're like, okay, well, how am I using that? Maybe very much like in swing music or like a horn hit. And how am I using the split besides just putting it in a phrase? can you do something more than with just that split? And the answer is yes. It can become a showcase in the improvisation piece. It can become a center attraction, if you will, to that solo. And like I mentioned to earlier, I mentioned that it helps me focus. It just keeps me saying something real versus just kind of meandering and searching for ideas. So I'm going to leave you with a little more playing today, but I hope that helps some of you who will not attend Sunday, and just to be thinking about your technique as tools. You've got to bring them in one at a time to examine what role they really have, and then work on piecing them. Perhaps the ultimate strategy, which we'll do a bunch of in class, is find your phrases and your melodies that you know and see how you're switching it up. Do you tend to always play a certain phrase a certain way with certain technique? And why aren't you experimenting with other techniques, swapping out those areas? That's what I would recommend. Something to think about. And that's what I've got on my mind today, blending that technique. I hope this video is helpful to some of you. I can't think of what else I want to share with you regarding this topic. Keep changing up those tracks. Change up the key of the harmonica. Don't live in the same key harmonica, because you get really good doing this in one key and go, boy, that set of techniques or the bending in this particular harmonica is challenging. You want to adjust to each key harmonica. And don't deny the position work either. That's my only other piece of advice. Like take this into take this into something like first position as well, with the track in the key of A instead of E. And see how you're blending it in first position, Okay, last thought for real this time. The ultimate thing that I find, the one thing I come back to that helps in the world of improvisation, this is one aspect of it that helps a lot, breaking down these techniques one at a time and thinking about how you're utilizing them. But one thing I've noticed over the years is that what makes the most interesting of solos is when you hear somebody actively considering and using the art of balancing these sounds, both in dynamic range from soft to loud, but also balancing just the use of like clean versus dirty sound versus staccato and legato, really balancing and using your technique as a way to keep you flowing. And one small example that comes to mind when I'm talking about this is take, for example, when you're tongue slapping something, like going, and it's really staccatoed, and then think about like these long slurs of these microtonal bends, which is a very different sound on the harmonica. So that often when I'm playing, I might be thinking of something just like that. Just to go back to the track in E, I might be going, so there's an actual consideration of how two techniques interact in a short amount of time when you're improvising, and how that can impact your playing. And so you start doing this with all of your techniques. Just keep swapping them. Be thinking like, is there some way in which I'm not considering using vibrato that I could be, or especially warbles. That's what I got today, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with me here on YouTube. I hope you make it a great day, and I will be back with more real soon. If you're digging this and you want to come out to class, check the video description. I'll put a link up there.